Hi, I'm Sabine Franco, also known as Sabine the Purpose Lawyer. I help create businesses, protect properties, and plan legacies so you can be safe while you pursue your purpose. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to be talking about today the best way to transfer property. Not really like the best way, but some different ways that you could consider transferring property and some things that you may not have known. So one of the things I wanted to point out first is that did you know that deed fraud is common? So what is deed fraud? Deed fraud is where somebody who doesn't own a property creates a deed, forges it in the name of the owner, and then records it and basically steals that property. So I wanted to point that out because this happens very often. People just think that they own properties and some this deed fraud has happened, they never really found out, and then all of a sudden they're being evicted from their home, or the property is just being used by someone else and you had no idea, right? And so a lot of the times this type of fraud happens in areas that are being gentrified. And so it could be properties that were abandoned. It could be properties where, maybe just a vacation home or something where no one really, visits. It could be properties owned by businesses. A lot of businesses own properties, and if a business owns multiple properties or many properties, they may not be paying attention to exactly what's going on. So that should definitely be paid attention to. It happens a lot to seniors. I want to encourage you to check with your seniors or check on your seniors if you have any in your life. They do get preyed upon to either manipulated into transferring their properties, or just because they're alone, people might see it as an opportunity. So make sure you're checking on those seniors. And then also properties that where the owner is deceased. So it could be friends or families where someone is deceased, they own a property, and then people see that and they go after basically the title. So if a property is left to you and left in the name of somebody who's deceased, you want to make sure that you are doing what needs to happen to transfer that property into the proper ownership to avoid these type of things. And another thing is that it's also good practice to check your land records, maybe annually or as often as you feel reasonable, to make sure that nothing improper has happened with the deed to your property. And then another way is some municipalities or counties where properties are held, they have these sort of like notifications that you can sign up for to be put on notice if anything is recorded on your property. And that way it's an easier way for you to keep up with that. If that's available to you, definitely take advantage of it. Okay, so I wanted to talk about some ways that properties are transferred, and because I get this question all the time, people are always like, how do I actually transfer a property to either someone else or to my name or to my business, things like that. So that typically happens with a deed. Ownership of property is called title. So if you own it, you have title to that property. But the actual instrument that allows you to transfer that ownership is called a deed, right? In most states, that's really what it's called. And so the deed is where it says who actually owns the property, where they got it from. It's going to say what is the property, like the size of it, etc. Sometimes it's going to say how much it was transferred for, and then that's going to be recorded in the state's land records or the county's land records where the property is located. So when people are transferring properties, you want to make sure that it's being done in the right way for your particular needs, right? So it's one of the simpler ways is to just transfer the deed to another by simply changing the names and re-recording it. However, that may not be the safe way, because when you transfer property outright, especially if it's for $0, there's going to be a change in like the tax status of that property, right? And we call that capital gains. And capital gains is basically the tax that you get charged, right, for appreciation of an asset. So the difference between what you bought it for and what you sold it for, all that value in between that we call equity gets taxed with the capital gains tax, right? And so if you just transfer property for $0 to somebody else, there is a tax that's attributed to that. So you may be okay with that and you may not be okay with that. In certain areas, like where there's been a lot of appreciation, So meaning it's gone up hundreds of thousands of dollars since the person owned it. That could be a pretty hefty tax bill, right? And it could be avoided and done in a better way depending on why you're transferring it, right? And so the difference between gifting it is that, you know, there is that capital gains tax, and just transferring it and inheriting it is a big difference, right? So if you're really wanting somebody to inherit a property, because usually if you're giving it away for $0, you're expecting that person to be gifted the property, or maybe it's your own business that you're transferring the property to. And then if you're not intending to do that, do not transfer your deed for $0, okay? That's very important. So if you're actually expecting the person to inherit it, or the what you're trying to achieve is for that person to inherit it, the deed transfer may not be the best thing to do, because with inheritance, there is no taxes, right? If that person gets that property or entity gets that property when you pass, then there is no tax. So it just depends on what's really trying to be achieved and whether or not you're okay with that tax happening. Another way to avoid that capital gains tax is to reserve a life estate. So how that really sort of functions is that the deed is transferred to the new owner, but the old owner keeps the right to live in the property, right? So there are several rights we call bundle of sticks of rights within property ownership, and one of the rights that you're holding back is the right to occupy, right? So what happens is that capital gains tax that we talked about will not ever occur, because the time where you're going to get that final stick and own all of the rights in the property is when that person passes away. So therefore, that's also another good way to transfer property without having a tax issue. However, that may not be right for everybody, because there are certain restrictions when it comes to having a life estate. You may have issues with mortgaging the property, with selling the property, with transferring the property. And so that may not be the right thing for you. So you want to consider, you know, what exactly you're trying to achieve. And another thing you want to watch out for is adding minors to your deed. That could be very detrimental to add a minor straight to your deed, because if you want to now change that in the future, you want to do something different with that, you really can't, because the minor cannot sign a contract to transfer that deed outside of their name. They can't really sign a legal document. And even if you're the parent, it may be something that you're not actually allowed to do. And so now you may require to get the court involved. Just like a whole big mess. No reason to do that. There are smarter ways to actually achieve this. So if that's something that you're interested in, please don't just add a minor, someone under the age of 18, to your property. So some other ways that you can transfer property is by way of using a trust. You could transfer your property to a trust and have whoever it is that you're looking to benefit from that property be the beneficiary of that trust. So say mom wants to transfer a property to daughter, and so mom will then transfer that property to a trust for daughter as the beneficiary, and therefore when mom passes away, daughter gets that property, right? One caveat with that is, depending on the type of trust, you may not have liability protection, which means that if mom gets sued, property is still vulnerable, same way as if the property was in mom's name, which may be okay. That may be okay for you. But if liability is an issue, you may want to consider possibly doing a transfer to an LLC if that's available to you. An LLC is a business entity and it has liability protection. What does that mean? If somebody sues mom, property is in an LLC, the likelihood is that the person will not be able to have access to that property, or that property will not be vulnerable. Now, again, this is for information only. This is not legal advice. So there may be other things at play here that, you know, changes the outcome of that. But this is just to open up your thoughts in your mind to let you know what possibilities are available. And my real goal in this is to make sure that you're not just willy-nilly transferring your deed out of your name to anybody else thinking that it's okay, it's just a transfer. There are a lot of things that can be affected. And so I just want you to be educated. If you have the desire or the need to transfer properties and you are trying to figure out the best way to do it, if you're located in New York and New Jersey, please feel free to reach out to us. And if you're in another state other than that, you could definitely, and you should definitely, reach out to a local attorney. I'm Sabine Franco. I help create businesses, protect properties, and plan legacy so you can be safe as you pursue your purpose. Thank you. See you next time.